Welcome to Somnus Sagas, where history meets tranquility. Tonight, we journey into the enchanting world of one of gaming's most beloved characters, a simple plumber whose adventures would captivate generations and reshape an entire industry. Close your eyes and let your mind wander back to a time when pixels were large, sounds were simple, and imagination filled in all the gaps. This is the story of Super Mario, not just a game, but a cultural phenomenon that began in the most unlikely of places. Our tale begins not in the Mushroom Kingdom, but in the quiet streets of 19th century Japan, where a small company making playing cards would eventually create magic that would echo through decades. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the gentle rhythm of this story carry you into peaceful sleep as we explore the wonderful, sometimes mysterious world of Mario. In the year 1889, in the ancient capital city of Kyoto, Japan, a young entrepreneur named Fusajiro Yamauchi founded a small company. The cherry blossoms were in bloom that spring, and the air was filled with the promise of new beginnings. Yamauchi's company, which he called Nintendo, meaning leave luck to heaven, began its humble journey creating handmade playing cards called Hanafuda. Picture these early days, craftsmen sitting in quiet workshops, carefully painting intricate designs on small rectangular cards. The cards featured beautiful images of flowers, birds, and seasonal scenes. Each stroke of the brush was deliberate, meditative. Nintendo's cards became known throughout Japan for their quality and artistry. For nearly 8 decades, Nintendo remained in this peaceful world of card games and simple toys. The company passed from generation to generation, each president adding their own gentle innovations. They experimented with plastic cards, ventured into taxi services, even tried their hand at love hotels and instant rice. But destiny had other plans. In 1949, a young man named Hiroshi Yamauchi inherited the company. He was ambitious but patient, like a gardener tending to seeds that would take years to bloom. Yamauchi sensed that the future held something different for Nintendo, something beyond the traditional boundaries of their playing card business. The 1970s brought whispers of a new technology from America: electronic games. Yamauchi listened to these whispers with the curiosity of a child and the wisdom of experience. He began to imagine Nintendo's cards transforming into something entirely new, something that could bring joy to families gathered around glowing screens instead of wooden tables. And so Nintendo took its first tentative steps into the electronic age, not knowing that they were planting the seeds for a revolution that would bloom into the adventures of a little plumber named Mario. The year was 1980, and the world was changing. Arcade halls buzzed with the electronic symphony of Pac-Man and Space Invaders. Young people gathered around these glowing cabinets, mesmerized by the simple magic of moving pictures they could control. Nintendo watched this phenomenon with growing interest. Enter Shigeru Miyamoto, a young industrial designer with the heart of an artist and the soul of a storyteller. Miyamoto-san, as he was respectfully called, had joined Nintendo in 1977 with dreams of creating something beautiful. He was inspired by everything around him: the way children played in parks, the stories his grandmother told him, the films of Steven Spielberg, and the simple joy of solving puzzles. Nintendo had been tasked with creating an arcade game for the American market, but their first attempt, a game called Radar Scope, had failed to capture hearts. Boxes of unsold Radar Scope cabinets sat in warehouses like sleeping giants, waiting for a second chance at life. Yamauchi turned to Miyamoto with a challenge: transform these failed cabinets into something magical. Create a story that would resonate across cultures and languages. Miyamoto accepted this challenge with the quiet determination of a monk beginning meditation. He began to dream of a simple story, a tale as old as time itself, a hero's journey to save someone in distress. But instead of knights and dragons, Miyamoto envisioned carpenters and giant apes. He drew inspiration from the American film King Kong and the sailor's tale of Popeye the Sailor Man. And so, in the gentle glow of his desk lamp, working late into the peaceful Kyoto nights, Miyamoto created Donkey Kong. The story was elegantly simple. A large ape had captured a woman and climbed to the top of a construction site. The hero, a carpenter with a red cap and blue overalls, would have to jump over barrels and climb ladders to rescue her. But what to call this brave little carpenter? Miyamoto and his team initially called him simply Jumpman, a name that described his most important ability. When the game made its way to America, the warehouse where the arcade cabinets were stored was owned by a man named Mario Segale. The name stuck like magic, and Jumpman became Mario. Mario's design was born from the beautiful constraints of early technology. The pixels were large and precious, each one carefully considered. His mustache wasn't a fashion choice. It was easier to animate than a mouth. His cap wasn't just stylish. It saved the artist from having to animate hair. His overalls made his arms visible against his body. Every element of Mario's appearance was both practical and iconic. When Donkey Kong was released in 1981, something wonderful happened. People didn't just play the game, they fell in love with it. The simple act of jumping over barrels became a meditation, a peaceful rhythm that players could lose themselves in. Mario had taken his first breath in the world, and the world welcomed him with open arms. Success has a way of opening doors that were previously invisible. After Donkey Kong's triumph, Nintendo began to see Mario not just as a character in a single game, but as a friend who could star in many adventures. Like a versatile actor taking on different roles, Mario was ready for his next performance. In 1983, Mario traded his carpenter's hammer for a plumber's wrench in a game simply called Mario Bros. This time, he wasn't alone in his adventures. Miyamoto introduced Mario's younger brother Luigi, whose name was inspired by a pizza restaurant near Nintendo's American headquarters called Mario and Luigi's. The setting shifted from construction sites to the mysterious underground world beneath New York City. Picture these digital sewers, long platforms suspended over darkness, pipes that seemed to breathe with life, and strange creatures emerging from the shadows. It was a world that felt both alien and strangely comforting, like exploring the basement of your childhood home. Luigi was more than just a second player. He was Mario's complement. Where Mario was bold and direct, Luigi was cautious and thoughtful. Their partnership represented something beautiful about cooperation and brotherhood. Together, they faced creatures called shell creepers and sidesteppers, learning that some problems required teamwork to solve. The gameplay itself was meditative in its simplicity. Players would bump enemies from below, then kick them away. It was like a gentle rhythm, a dance performed on digital stages. The sound effects became a lullaby of sorts. The soft bump of hitting a platform from below, the satisfying thud of an enemy being flipped, the cheerful coin collection sound that would become one of the most recognizable audio signatures in the world. But Mario Brothers was more than just a game. It was a testing ground for ideas that would later bloom into something extraordinary. Miyamoto and his team were learning what made Mario special. what kinds of adventures suited him best, and how to create worlds that felt alive despite being made of simple pixels and code. The game also introduced the concept of the POW block, a special platform that, when hit, would shake the entire stage and flip over all enemies at once. This wasn't just a gameplay mechanic, it was a moment of power that felt almost magical, like Mario had briefly gained the ability to reshape his entire world with a single action. During this time, Nintendo was also learning about the delicate art of bringing games from Japan to America. Cultural translation required more than just changing the language. It meant understanding different sensibilities, different rhythms of play, different expectations of what made a game enjoyable. As Mario Bros. Found its audience, something was stirring within Nintendo. Miyamoto was dreaming of something bigger, something that would transform not just arcade gaming, but bring the magic of Mario into people's homes. The stage was being set for a revolution, though no one yet knew just how profound that revolution would be. The year 1983 brought darkness to the video game industry in America. What historians would later call the video game crash had swept through the market like a sudden winter, leaving store shelves filled with unwanted cartridges and consumers who had lost faith in electronic entertainment. Many believed that video games were just a passing fad, destined to fade away like so many other trends. But in Kyoto, within the quiet walls of Nintendo, a different story was being written. Yamauchi looked at this crisis not as an ending, but as an opportunity. Like a farmer who knows that the best time to plant is after the storm has cleared the field, Nintendo prepared to introduce something revolutionary to the American market. They called it the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES. But hardware alone wouldn't be enough to revive an entire industry. Nintendo needed a game that would remind people why they fell in love with video games in the first place. They needed magic, pure and simple. And magic, they decided, wore red overalls and had a magnificent moustache. Miyamoto approached the creation of Super Mario Bros. Like a master storyteller preparing an epic tale. He had learned so much from Mario's previous adventures. What made players smile? What created that perfect balance of challenge and joy? What transformed a simple game into an experience that could transport someone to another world entirely? The goal was ambitious beyond imagination. Create a side-scrolling adventure that would span multiple worlds, each more wondrous than the last. Mario would no longer be confined to single screens or simple objectives. Instead, he would embark on a true odyssey through the Mushroom Kingdom, a land that felt both fantastical and somehow familiar. Picture Miyamoto in those creative days, sketching level designs with the careful attention of a landscape architect. Each hill was positioned to create a specific feeling. Each pipe was placed to suggest mystery and possibility. The famous World 1-1- the first level that millions of players would experience dash, was designed as a gentle tutorial that would teach without feeling like teaching, challenge without overwhelming, and delight without explanation. The power-up system was revolutionary in its elegance. When Mario touched a super mushroom, he would grow larger, transforming from small Mario to Super Mario. This simple mechanic created a profound psychological effect. Players didn't just feel like they were controlling a character who was getting stronger. They felt like they themselves were growing, becoming more capable, more heroic. The Fire Flower took this transformation even further. Mario, in his white outfit with red cap, could throw fireballs, becoming not just larger, but actively powerful. These weren't just gameplay mechanics. They were metaphors for growth, for the journey from ordinary to extraordinary, that every hero must take. The world Miyamoto created was filled with secrets that rewarded curiosity. Hidden blocks floated invisibly in the sky, waiting for players who dared to jump into seemingly empty space. Warp zones offered shortcuts through the kingdom for those clever enough to find them. Coins weren't just points. They were breadcrumbs that guided players along paths while rewarding exploration. And then there were the enemies, each designed with personality despite their pixel limitations. Goombas walked steadily forward with single-minded determination. Koopa Troopers could be jumped on, their shells becoming tools that Mario could kick at other enemies. Piranha plants emerged from pipes with perfect timing, teaching players the rhythm of patience and opportunity. The music, composed by Koji Kondo, wasn't just background noise. It was the heartbeat of the Mushroom Kingdom. The overworld theme became one of the most recognized melodies in human history, a song that could instantly transport anyone who heard it back to childhood wonder. The underground theme created mystery and slight tension. The castle theme built anticipation and urgency. Each composition perfectly matched the emotional landscape of its environment. When Super Mario Bros. Was released in Japan in September 1985, and later in America, it didn't just succeed. It redefined what success meant. The game sold millions of copies, but more importantly, it created millions of memories. Families gathered around television sets, passing controllers back and forth, sharing in Mario's adventures together. Children who had never held a controller before found themselves natural explorers in the Mushroom Kingdom. Adults who thought video games were just for kids discovered joy in jumping on Goombas. The game bridged generations and cultures, speaking a universal language of play and wonder. But perhaps most remarkably, Super Mario Bros. Didn't just save the video game industry, it elevated it. It showed that video games could be art, could be experiences that stayed with people long after the console was turned off. Mario had become more than a character. He had become a gateway into imagination itself. Success, like a river finding the ocean, naturally flows toward expansion. Mario's triumph in Super Mario Bros. Opened countless doors, and Nintendo walked through each one with the curiosity of explorers charting new territories. The late 1980s and early 1990s became a golden age of experimentation, as Mario tried on different roles like an actor discovering his range. In 1988, Super Mario Bros. 2 presented players with something unexpected, a Mario adventure that felt like a dream within a dream. Originally, a different game entirely called Doki Doki Panic, in Japan, it was transformed into a Mario experience for American audiences. This creative decision, born from Nintendo's concern that the true sequel was too difficult for Western players, accidentally created something beautiful. In this strange new land called Subcon, Mario could pluck vegetables from the ground and throw them at enemies. He could pick up his foes and hurl them at each other. Most remarkably, players could choose between Mario, Luigi, Princess Peach, or Toad, each with their own unique abilities. Princess Peach could float briefly through the air, her dress acting like a parachute, a magical moment that felt like defying gravity itself. The game introduced characters who would become permanent residents of Mario's universe. Shy guys with their mysterious masks, Birdo with her distinctive bow, and the peculiar vegetables that seemed to grow in infinite varieties. It was as if Mario had wandered into someone else's dream and made it his own. Meanwhile, the true Super Mario Bros. 2, later released in America as The Lost Levels, remained in Japan, a brutally challenging experience that tested the limits of player skill and patience. This parallel existence of two different sequels became one of the first great mysteries in Mario's expanding mythology. Super Mario Bros. 3, released in 1988 in Japan and 1990 in America, was Nintendo's answer to the question, what if we gave Mario an entire world to explore? The game was structured like a theatrical performance, complete with curtains that rose at the beginning and stage backgrounds visible behind the action. It was a subtle reminder that all games are, in essence, performances, collaborative stories told between creator and player. This adventure introduced the concept of different suits that gave Mario new abilities. The raccoon suit, with its adorable tail and ears, allowed Mario to fly, a power that felt nothing short of miraculous. The frog suit made underwater levels a joy instead of a challenge. The tanuki suit combined flight with the ability to transform into an invulnerable statue. Each transformation was a gift that expanded the vocabulary of play. The world map itself was revolutionary, a living, breathing representation of the Mushroom Kingdom that players could explore at their own pace. Castles, mushroom houses, and hidden passages created a sense that this was a real place with its own geography and logic. During this period, Mario also began appearing in unexpected contexts. Dr. Mario, released in 1990, transformed the plumber into a physician, prescribing colored pills to eliminate viruses in a puzzle game that was both meditative and addictive. It showed that Mario's appeal transcended genre. His presence could make any type of game feel welcoming and fun. The Game Boy, Nintendo's revolutionary portable console, gave Mario new dimensions to explore. Super Mario Land created pocket-sized adventures that could be carried anywhere. Suddenly, Mario's world became truly portable, accompanying players on car rides, lunch breaks, and quiet moments throughout their days. But perhaps most significantly, this period saw Mario begin his transition from video game character to cultural icon. His image appeared on lunchboxes and bedsheets. Cartoon series brought his adventures to Saturday morning television. The Super Mario Bros. Super Show mixed live-action segments with animated adventures, creating a multimedia experience that expanded Mario's universe beyond the confines of gaming. Children who had never owned a Nintendo console still knew who Mario was. His red cap and blue overalls became as recognizable as any cartoon character or movie star. He had achieved something remarkable, universal recognition not through marketing campaigns or celebrity endorsements, but through the simple power of bringing joy to millions of people. This period also saw the birth of what fans would later call Mario mythology, the idea that these games weren't just separate adventures, but chapters in an ongoing story. Players began to wonder about the relationship between different kingdoms, the nature of the power-ups, and the deeper meaning behind Mario's endless quest to rescue Princess Peach. Nintendo, perhaps unconsciously, was creating something that went beyond entertainment. They were building a modern mythology, complete with heroes, villains, magical transformations, and moral lessons about courage, persistence, and the power of helping others. The year 1996 marked a pivotal moment in the history of interactive entertainment, though few realized it at the time. Nintendo was preparing to launch the Nintendo 64, a console that would introduce something that seemed almost impossible to early gamers: true three-dimensional adventures. And who better to guide players into this new dimension than their most trusted friend, Mario? Miyamoto approached the creation of Super Mario 64 like an architect designing the first building in a new city. Every decision would establish precedents. Every innovation would become a foundation for future creations. The challenge was immense. How do you take a character who had spent 15 years moving left and right and suddenly give him the freedom to move in any direction? Picture the development team in those early days, working with hardware that was revolutionary but still limited. They began not with grand adventure concepts, but with something beautifully simple. They created a small room and put Mario in it. Then they spent months just making Mario feel perfect to control. They adjusted his walk, refined his jump, calibrated his response to the analog stick until moving, Mario, felt as natural as moving your own hand. This attention to the fundamentals created something magical. When players first pushed that analog stick and watched Mario respond with fluid, natural movement, it felt like witnessing a miracle. Mario could now tiptoe carefully across narrow bridges or break into a full sprint across open fields. He could turn in smooth circles, approach objects from any angle, and most remarkably, the camera could follow him anywhere. The game's structure was revolutionary in its approach to exploration and discovery. Instead of linear levels that moved from left to right, Super Mario 64 presented players with paintings, literal portals to different worlds that Mario could jump through. Each painting led to a complete three-dimensional environment filled with multiple objectives, hidden secrets, and new ways to move through space. Princess Peach's castle became one of the most beloved hub worlds in gaming history. Players could spend hours simply exploring its halls, discovering secret areas, and marveling at details that seemed impossibly rich for their time. The castle felt alive. Sunlight streamed through windows. Water flowed in the moat, and mysterious sounds echoed from hidden chambers. The camera system, controlled by an invisible character named Lakitu, who followed Mario around on a cloud with a camera, was itself a revolutionary concept. Players could adjust their view, zoom in and out, and see Mario's adventures from multiple angles. It was like being given the power to direct their own personal movie, starring their favorite hero. Each world within the paintings offered its own unique personality and challenges. Bob-omb Battlefield introduced players to three-dimensional combat and exploration, with its gentle slopes and friendly pink bob-ombs. Cool Mountain presented the joy and terror of sliding down an endless slide, a sequence that many players repeated dozens of times not because they had to, but because it was pure fun. Hazy Maze Cave offered underground exploration that felt truly three-dimensional for the first time. Players could swim through underwater tunnels, navigate past a sleeping giant dragon, and solve puzzles that required thinking in all three dimensions. Tick-Tock Clock challenged players' timing and precision as they navigated through a giant mechanical timepiece where every gear and pendulum was in constant motion. The Power Star collection system created a sense of meaningful progression. Each star felt like a genuine achievement, often requiring players to master a specific skill or discover a particular secret. Some stars were hidden in plain sight. Others required complex sequences of actions to unlock. The game rewarded curiosity, patience, and skill in equal measure. Mario's moveset in 3 dimensions was a masterpiece of character animation and control. His long jump could carry him across vast gaps. His triple jump bounced higher and higher with perfect comic timing. He could climb walls, swim in any direction, crawl through tunnels, and even sleep if left idle, a detail that added personality to every moment of the game. The boss battles were reimagined for 3-dimensional space. Fighting Bowser involved grabbing his tail and spinning him around before launching him into bombs. a sequence that was both physical and strategic. King Bob Om challenged players to a wrestling match on top of a mountain. Each encounter felt personal and tactile in a way that two-dimensional games couldn't quite achieve. Perhaps most importantly, Super Mario 64 established the template for three-dimensional adventure games that is still used today. The combination of hub-world exploration, multiple objectives per level, analog movement control, and dynamic camera work became the foundation upon which countless future games would build. But beyond its technical achievements, Super Mario 64 captured something intangible about the joy of exploration and discovery. Players didn't just complete objectives, they lived in these worlds, spending countless hours finding new ways to move through familiar spaces, discovering secrets that made them feel like true explorers. When children first played Super Mario 64, many experienced something they had never felt before: the sense of being truly free in a digital world. They could run in any direction, approach challenges from multiple angles, and express their personality through how they chose to navigate each space. Mario had evolved from a character players controlled into a friend they could be. In the quiet corners of the internet, where dedicated fans gathered to share theories and decode hidden messages, the Mario universe has inspired some of the most creative and elaborate conspiracy theories in gaming history. These theories, whether true or imaginative, reveal something beautiful about how deeply Mario's adventures have embedded themselves in our collective consciousness. The most persistent and intriguing theory revolves around the idea that Mario is not the hero we believe him to be, but rather an invader disrupting the natural order of the Mushroom Kingdom. Picture this alternative narrative. The Goombas and Koopa Troopers are peaceful citizens going about their daily lives when a strange plumber begins jumping on their heads and stealing their coins. From this perspective, Bowser becomes not a villain, but a king trying to protect his subjects from an inexplicable threat. This theory gains curious support when you consider that many enemies simply walk forward, seemingly minding their own business until Mario appears. The Goombas show no aggressive behavior beyond walking. They don't chase Mario or attack him directly. They simply exist in their world until he arrives to disrupt it. Even more intriguingly, when Mario defeats Bowser and rescues Princess Peach, she often seems to end up captured again remarkably quickly, as if she's complicit in maintaining this cycle. Another theory that has captured imaginations suggests that the entire Mario universe is an elaborate stage play or performance. Super Mario Bros. 3 made this metaphor explicit, with its theatrical curtains and stage-like backgrounds, but theorists argue that this concept applies to all of Mario's adventures. The repetitive nature of his quests, the way enemies respawn in the same locations, the fact that castles contain identical layouts. All of this could be evidence that Mario is an actor playing different roles in an ongoing performance. This theatrical theory extends to explain why Mario can be a plumber in one adventure, a doctor in another, a race car driver in a third. He's not changing careers. He's simply taking on different roles in different productions. Luigi, Princess Peach, and even Bowser become fellow actors in this elaborate ongoing show. One of the most haunting theories in Mario mythology concerns the Minus World glitch in the original Super Mario Bros. By performing specific actions near the warp zone in World 1-2, players could access a level designated as World -1, an endless looping water level that could never be completed. Theorists have suggested this represents a kind of purgatory or limbo within the game's code. a place where Mario becomes trapped between dimensions. The Minus World has inspired countless stories about Mario being lost in digital limbo, forever swimming through an underwater maze with no exit. Some interpret this as a metaphor for the repetitive nature of video game existence. Mario is doomed to repeat the same adventures endlessly, never truly reaching a final resolution. Color symbolism throughout the Mario series has also attracted theoretical attention. Mario's red represents passion and heroism, while Luigi's green suggests growth and natural harmony. Princess Peach's pink symbolizes innocence and royalty, while Bowser's yellow and green combination represents earth and material power. Some theorists argue that these color choices aren't accidental, but represent deeper archetypal relationships between the characters. The power-up system has inspired theories about transformation and identity. When Mario consumes a mushroom and grows larger, some suggest this represents a coming-of-age metaphor. Childhood Mario becoming adult Mario. The Fire Flower transformation could symbolize the acquisition of adult power and responsibility. The various animal suits in later games might represent different aspects of personality or different life roles we all play. More elaborate theories attempt to connect Mario's universe to real-world mythology. The recurring theme of traveling through pipes has been linked to shamanic traditions of journeying through underground passages to other realms. The mushroom power-ups have obvious connections to psychedelic experiences and altered states of consciousness. Princess Peach's repeated capture and rescue could represent cyclical mythologies of death and rebirth found in many ancient cultures. Some fans have even created elaborate timelines attempting to explain the relationships between different Mario games, treating minor inconsistencies as clues to deeper mysteries. Why does Princess Peach sometimes have magical floating powers? How can Mario breathe underwater in some games but not others? These questions have spawned complex theories about parallel dimensions, time travel, and multiple versions of familiar characters. The recurring motif of castles that aren't what they seem has inspired theories about illusion and reality. In many Mario games, players fight through elaborate castles only to discover that the princess is in another castle. This endless deferral of resolution could represent the illusory nature of achievement in modern life. We think we've reached our goal, only to discover it was always somewhere else. Whether these theories reflect intentional hidden meanings or are simply creative interpretations of beloved childhood experiences, they demonstrate something remarkable about Mario's cultural impact. These games have become rich enough, meaningful enough, and familiar enough to support the same kind of elaborate interpretation typically reserved for classical literature or ancient myths. In a way, these conspiracy theories and hidden meanings represent the highest compliment that can be paid to any work of art. They show that Mario's adventures have become so deeply embedded in our imaginations that we can't help but search for deeper truths within them. As the new millennium dawned, Mario found himself at another crossroads of innovation. The video game industry had matured far beyond anyone's wildest dreams, and players' expectations had grown more sophisticated. Nintendo faced a beautiful challenge. How do you reinvent a character who has already achieved perfection, while honoring everything that made him beloved in the first place? The answer came in waves of creativity that demonstrated Nintendo's deep understanding of what makes play truly magical. Super Mario Galaxy, released in 2007, took the three-dimensional freedom of Mario 64 and expanded it to cosmic proportions. Instead of exploring a single castle, Mario would journey across entire galaxies, each with its own gravitational rules and physical laws. Picture the wonder of controlling Mario as he ran across small planets, the camera smoothly rotating to keep his feet always pointing down, relative to the surface beneath him. Gravity became not just a game mechanic, but a source of constant delight and surprise. Players could leap from planet to planet, each transition feeling like a small miracle of physics and imagination. The orchestral soundtrack, performed by a full symphony orchestra, elevated Mario's adventures to operatic heights. Each melody seemed to celebrate not just the specific level being played, but the entire history of Mario's musical journey. The music swelled with emotion during triumphant moments and whispered with mystery during quiet exploration sequences. Galaxy's power-up system introduced the bee mushroom, which allowed Mario to fly briefly and stick to flowery surfaces, and the boo mushroom, which let him phase through walls like a ghost. These transformations felt magical in ways that earlier power-ups couldn't quite match. They didn't just change Mario's abilities, they seemed to change the fundamental nature of reality around him. New Super Mario Bros., also from this era, represented something equally important but different, a return to the side-scrolling traditions that had defined Mario's early adventures, but enhanced with modern technology and refined over decades of experience. The game felt both nostalgic and fresh, like revisiting a childhood home that had been lovingly restored. The new Super Mario Bros. Series introduced 4-player simultaneous gameplay, allowing entire families to adventure through the Mushroom Kingdom together. But this wasn't just traditional cooperation. Players could help each other reach difficult platforms, or, just as easily, accidentally knock each other into pits. The resulting chaos was often more entertaining than perfectly coordinated play. These games also introduced the concept of the Super Guide, a system that would offer to complete difficult sections for struggling players. This innovation was controversial among some traditional gamers, but it represented Nintendo's commitment to ensuring that everyone could experience the joy of Mario's adventures, regardless of their skill level or gaming experience. Meanwhile, the portable gaming space saw Mario adapting to new contexts and constraints. The Nintendo DS, with its dual screens and touch controls, gave birth to entirely new ways of interacting with Mario's world. Players could blow into the microphone to move platforms, use the touchscreen to reveal hidden elements, or play with the DS sideways like a book. Super Mario 3D Land on the Nintendo 3DS demonstrated how stereoscopic 3D could enhance gameplay rather than just providing visual novelty. Depth perception became crucial for judging jumps and navigating obstacles. Hidden blocks became easier to spot when they cast shadows in three-dimensional space. The technology served the gameplay rather than overwhelming it. The Wii console brought motion controls to Mario's world through new Super Mario Bros. Wii and later games. Players could tilt the controller to guide platforms, shake it to perform certain actions, or point at the screen to freeze enemies. These controls felt intuitive rather than gimmicky, natural extensions of the desire to reach into Mario's world and directly manipulate it. Perhaps most remarkably, this modern era saw Nintendo begin to deconstruct and rebuild Mario's fundamental gameplay mechanics. Super Mario Maker, released in 2015, gave players the tools that had previously been reserved for Nintendo's own designers. Anyone could create Mario levels, share them with the world, and play an infinite variety of user-generated challenges. The impact of Super Mario Maker extended far beyond just providing more levels to play. It demystified the creative process behind Mario games, showing players exactly how the magic was constructed. Suddenly, everyone could understand why certain enemy placements felt satisfying, why particular jump sequences created tension and release, why specific power-up locations enhanced the flow of a level. This period also saw Mario venturing into unexpected genres with increasing confidence. Mario Kart evolved from a simple racing game into a social phenomenon that could bring together players of all ages and skill levels. The series' rubber band AI and strategic item system ensured that anyone could potentially win any race, making every competition unpredictable and exciting until the final moment. Super Mario Odyssey, released in 2017, represented perhaps the ultimate evolution of three-dimensional Mario gameplay. The possession mechanic, activated by throwing Mario's sentient hat Cappy, allowed players to control almost any enemy or object in the game world. This wasn't just a new power-up, it was a fundamental reimagining of what it meant to be Mario. Through Cappy, players could experience the Mushroom Kingdom from entirely new perspectives. What did it feel like to be a Goomba, walking steadily forward? How did a bullet bill experience its explosive journey across the sky? The game answered these questions with playful creativity that felt both surprising and inevitable. The modern era has also seen Mario's world expand through collaborations and crossovers that would have been unimaginable in earlier decades. Mario has raced alongside Sonic the Hedgehog, fought in Super Smash Bros. Tournaments, and even appeared in mobile games that introduced his adventures to entirely new audiences. These developments represent more than just technological advancement or business expansion. They show how Mario has become a universal language of play, adaptable to any platform or context, while maintaining the essential qualities that have made him beloved for decades. In the year 1719, on the sun-drenched coast of West Africa, a respectable Welsh merchant sailor named Bartholomew Roberts was going about his honest work aboard the slave ship Princess. Roberts was not a man who sought adventure or danger. He was methodical, reliable, and content with his quiet life at sea. He wore his clothes neatly pressed, kept his quarters immaculate, and had earned a reputation as a skilled navigator who could be trusted with any voyage. Picture Roberts on that fateful morning. A tall, dignified man in his late 30s, his dark hair neatly combed, standing at the ship's rail watching the African coastline drift by. He had no way of knowing that this ordinary day would transform him into the most successful pirate captain in history. The Princess was anchored near the Gold Coast when dark sails appeared on the horizon. Captain Howell Davis, a notorious pirate captain, had spotted the merchant vessel and decided to make it his prize. As the pirate ship approached, Roberts felt his heart sink, not from fear, but from the resignation of a man who knew his peaceful life was about to change forever. When Davis and his crew boarded the Princess, they found something unexpected. Most merchant sailors were either terrified or defiant, but Roberts remained calm and composed. He answered Davis's questions with quiet dignity, showing neither the cowering fear nor false bravado that pirates usually encountered. This composure caught Davis's attention immediately. Davis was no ordinary pirate. He was educated, charismatic, and possessed of a strategic mind that had made him one of the most successful captains of his time. In Roberts, he recognized a kindred spirit, someone who could think clearly under pressure, who commanded natural respect from other sailors, and who possessed the navigational skills that were precious beyond gold in the pirate world. "Join my crew," Davis offered, "and I'll make you my quartermaster." To Roberts, this wasn't an invitation. It was a choice between death and a life he had never wanted. With the heavy heart of a man watching his old life disappear over the horizon, Roberts accepted. For the next 6 weeks, Roberts sailed with Davis's crew, learning the intricate social dynamics of pirate life. He discovered that pirate ships were not the anarchic chaos he had imagined, but surprisingly democratic societies with elaborate codes of conduct. Crews elected their captains, decisions were made by majority vote, and everyone from the captain to the newest recruit had clearly defined rights and responsibilities. Roberts threw himself into understanding this new world with the same methodical attention he had once applied to merchant sailing. He learned that successful pirate crews operated more like floating republics than the tyrannical kingdoms portrayed in popular stories. Captains who became too autocratic found themselves voted out of command or even marooned by their own men. But Roberts's education in piracy was cut tragically short. During a raid on Principe Island, Captain Davis was killed in an ambush. The crew found themselves leaderless, anchored off a hostile coast, with Portuguese soldiers hunting them and their beloved captain dead on the beach. In this moment of crisis, something remarkable happened. The crew, following their democratic traditions, held an election for a new captain. They needed someone with navigational skills to get them safely away from Principe. They needed someone who could command respect without ruling through fear. They needed someone who understood both the practical realities of seamanship and the delicate social balance that kept pirate crews from tearing themselves apart. They chose Bartholomew Roberts, the reluctant merchant sailor who had been a pirate for only 6 weeks. Roberts accepted the captaincy with characteristic solemnity. He had never wanted to be a pirate, but if fate had thrust this role upon him, he would perform it with the same excellence he brought to everything else. Standing on the deck of his new command, looking out at the faces of men who had just placed their lives in his hands, Roberts made a silent promise. He would not just be their captain. He would be their protector, their organizer, and their guide to a form of piracy based on fairness rather than fear. Captain Roberts' first act was not to plan a raid or seek revenge for Davis's death, but to sit down with his crew and establish a comprehensive code of conduct. This wasn't unusual among pirate crews. Most ships had articles of agreement, but Roberts approached the task with the thoroughness of a legal scholar and the wisdom of someone who understood human nature. The code that emerged from these discussions was remarkable for its time, more progressive in many ways than the laws governing legitimate society. Roberts and his men created what was essentially a floating democracy, complete with checks and balances, individual rights, and social protections that wouldn't become common in mainstream society for decades. The first article established the fundamental principle of pirate democracy. Every man shall have an equal vote in affairs of moment. This wasn't just ceremonial. It meant that the lowliest crew member had the same voice as the most experienced pirate when it came to major decisions about where to sail, which ships to attack, and how to distribute their prizes. The code guaranteed equal shares of fresh provisions and strong liquor for every crew member. In an age when naval and merchant crews often suffered from poor food and limited rations, Roberts's pirates enjoyed a standard of living that was remarkably egalitarian. No man would go hungry while another feasted. No sailor would go thirsty while others drank their fill. Perhaps most remarkably, Roberts instituted what was essentially the world's first maritime medical insurance system. Any crew member who lost a limb or suffered permanent injury in service to the ship would receive compensation from the common fund, 600 pieces of 8 for the loss of a right arm, 500 for a left arm, 500 for a right leg, 400 for a left leg, and 100 pieces of 8 for the loss of an eye or finger. This provision reveals something profound about Roberts' philosophy. He understood that pirates risked their lives every time they engaged in combat, and he believed that the crew as a whole had a responsibility to care for those who were injured in their common cause. It was a concept of social responsibility that was centuries ahead of its time. The code also established strict rules about conduct aboard ship. Gambling with dice and cards was forbidden, not from moral objection, but because Roberts had observed how gambling debts could tear a crew apart with arguments and violence. Instead of banning all recreation, the crew was encouraged to sing, dance, and tell stories during their leisure time. Roberts instituted a quiet time policy that mandated all lights and noise to cease by 8 o'clock each evening. This wasn't just about maintaining discipline. It was about ensuring that every crew member got adequate rest. A tired sailor was a dangerous sailor, both to himself and to his shipmates. Women were strictly forbidden aboard ship, not from misogyny, but from Roberts's practical understanding that romantic rivalry could destroy crew cohesion. However, the code also mandated that any crew member who deserted his wife or children would forfeit his share of any prizes, ensuring that pirates couldn't simply abandon their families without consequence. The code addressed the treatment of captives with surprising humanity. While interrogation was permitted to discover the location of valuable cargo, unnecessary cruelty was forbidden. Roberts understood that reputation mattered. Ships that surrendered peacefully to his flag would be treated fairly, while those that resisted would face the full consequences of their defiance. Religious observance was protected under the code, with every crew member guaranteed the right to worship according to his own beliefs. Sunday was established as a day of rest whenever possible, reflecting Roberts' own Welsh Methodist upbringing and his belief that even pirates deserve the spiritual peace. The code also established elaborate procedures for resolving disputes between crew members. Rather than allowing conflicts to fester or explode into violence, Roberts created a system where grievances could be aired publicly and resolved by crew vote. It was a form of maritime justice that was far more fair and transparent than what most men could expect in legitimate society. Perhaps most importantly, the code established clear procedures for deposing a captain who became tyrannical or incompetent. Roberts, despite being the most successful pirate of his era, could be voted out of command if his crew felt he was no longer serving their interests. This ultimate democratic check on power ensured that leadership remained accountable to the crew. These articles weren't just written down and forgotten. They were living documents that guided daily life aboard Roberts' ships. Every new crew member had to swear an oath to uphold the code, and violations were dealt with swiftly and fairly according to predetermined penalties. The result was a pirate crew that operated with remarkable efficiency and loyalty. Roberts' men didn't follow him out of fear or blind obedience, but because they had participated in creating the rules that governed their shared life. They fought harder, sailed better, and stayed more loyal than crews ruled by traditional autocratic captains. What set Captain Roberts apart from other pirates wasn't just his democratic crew management, but his personal code of honor that governed his own behavior. While many pirates of the era were known for their crude manners and violent temperaments, Roberts maintained the bearing and dignity of a gentleman throughout his career. Roberts dressed impeccably, even by the standards of legitimate sea captains. He wore fine coats of crimson silk, elegant feathered hats, and carried himself with the posture of nobility. His cabin was kept as neat as any admiral's quarters, with books, charts, and navigational instruments arranged with military precision. Visitors to his ship often remarked that they felt they were meeting a distinguished naval officer rather than a pirate captain. This attention to appearance wasn't vanity, it was strategy. Roberts understood that respect often began with first impressions. When merchant captains saw a well-dressed, articulate pirate commander treating them with courtesy, they were more likely to surrender peacefully and provide accurate information about their cargo. Roberts could be more effective with polite words than many pirates were with threats and violence. Roberts established strict personal rules about when and how he would use violence. He never killed prisoners except in cases of extreme necessity, and he forbade his crew from torturing captives for sport. When merchants surrendered peacefully, they were treated as honored guests until they could be safely deposited at the nearest port. Many captains who fell victim to Roberts later wrote that they had been treated with more courtesy by the pirates than they usually received from legitimate authorities. The captain also maintained a strict code about which ships he would attack. Vessels carrying medical supplies or food to colonies suffering from disease or famine were allowed to pass unmolested. Ships flying flags of countries that had shown mercy to pirates were often spared. Roberts even maintained a mental list of merchants who had treated captured pirates fairly, and their ships enjoyed his protection. Perhaps most remarkably, Roberts established what amounted to a maritime grievance system. Captains who felt they had been wronged by legitimate authorities could appeal to him for justice. If Roberts determined that a merchant or naval officer had acted cruelly or unfairly, that person's ships would be specifically targeted for capture. In this way, Roberts positioned himself not just as a pirate, but as a kind of maritime sheriff dispensing justice on the high seas. Roberts' ship, the Royal Fortune, became known throughout the Caribbean and along the African coast as a place where fairness could be expected even from pirates. This reputation served him well. Many ships surrendered immediately upon seeing his distinctive black flag with its skull and crossbones, knowing that surrender meant safety, while resistance meant destruction. The captain's personal habits reflected his discipline-based nature. He rarely drank to excess, never gambled, and maintained a daily routine of reading, chart study, and correspondence that wouldn't have been out of place in a monastery. He wrote regular letters to contacts in various ports, maintaining an intelligence network that kept him informed of ship movements, naval patrols, and political developments. Roberts also instituted what might be called the first pirate rehabilitation program. When young men were pressed into service from captured vessels, Roberts made sure they received the proper training in seamanship, navigation, and combat. Many of these reluctant pirates later chose to remain with the crew, not because they were forced to, but because Roberts had given them skills and opportunities they never could have found in legitimate society. The captain maintained correspondence with his family in Wales throughout his pirate career, sending money home regularly through a network of reliable intermediaries. This wasn't just filial duty. It was part of Roberts' belief that a man's obligations to his family didn't disappear simply because he had become a pirate. When dealing with colonial governors and naval commanders, Roberts conducted himself like a head of state. His letters were formally written, his negotiations conducted with diplomatic courtesy, and his word, once given, was never broken. This reputation for reliability made him a more effective leader than many legitimate officials of his time. Roberts also established what might be called a pirate retirement system. Crew members who wished to leave the pirate life were given their fair share of accumulated prizes and helped to establish themselves in legitimate trades. Roberts understood that not every man was suited for a lifetime of piracy, and he believed that forcing unwilling men to remain with the crew ultimately weakened everyone. This combination of personal honor, strategic thinking, and genuine care for his crew's welfare created a loyalty that went far beyond fear or greed. Roberts's men followed him because they believed in him, and because they knew he would never ask them to do anything he wouldn't do himself. The Royal Fortune, Captain Roberts's flagship, was more than just a pirate vessel. It was a floating experiment in democracy that operated according to principles that wouldn't become common in legitimate society for decades. Life aboard this remarkable ship followed rhythms and routines that balanced the practical necessities of seamanship with the social needs of men from vastly different backgrounds, learning to live together as equals. Each morning aboard the Royal Fortune began not with the harsh commands typical of naval or merchant vessels, but with a democratic process. The crew would gather on deck to discuss the day's activities, vote on navigation decisions, and address any disputes or concerns that had arisen overnight. Every voice was heard, from the most experienced sailor to the newest recruit, and decisions were made by majority vote. The ship's daily routine reflected Roberts's understanding that idle men were dangerous men. Every crew member had specific duties that rotated regularly to prevent boredom and ensure that everyone learned multiple skills. The cook of one week might be a lookout the next, and the gunner's mate might find himself learning navigation. This cross-training created a crew that could adapt to any situation and ensured that no single person became indispensable. Meals aboard the Royal Fortune were communal affairs that reinforced the democratic nature of the crew. Officers and common sailors ate the same food, prepared by crew members who took turns in the galley. The ship's articles guaranteed equal portions for all, and Roberts himself often served the food to demonstrate that leadership was about service, not privilege. The evening hours were perhaps the most remarkable aspect of life aboard Roberts' ship. After the mandatory quiet time began at 8 o'clock, the crew would gather for what they called Parliament, democratic discussions about everything from the ship's destination to the distribution of captured prizes. These sessions were conducted with parliamentary procedure that would have impressed legitimate legislators. Education was highly valued aboard the Royal Fortune. Roberts maintained a library of books on navigation, medicine, law, and literature, and crew members were encouraged to improve their reading and writing skills. Evening classes were held on deck under lantern light, with more educated crew members teaching their shipmates. Roberts believed that informed men made better decisions in their democratic assemblies. The ship's medical care was remarkably advanced for its time. Roberts employed a surgeon who was paid a premium wage and given complete authority over medical decisions. The crew's medical insurance system meant that every man could receive treatment without worrying about the cost, and the ship maintained medical supplies that were superior to those found on many naval vessels. Music and storytelling played important roles in maintaining crew morale. The ship carried several musicians who were paid regular wages for their performances, and crew members were encouraged to share stories, songs, and dances from their various homelands. These cultural exchanges created bonds that transcended the typical divisions of nationality, race, and social class. The Royal Fortune operated according to a watch system that ensured no man worked excessive hours. Unlike many ships where common sailors were worked to exhaustion, while officers rested, Roberts's crew enjoyed regular rest periods and fair distribution of duties. This policy didn't just prevent fatigue. It demonstrated that every crew member's health and well-being mattered. Discipline aboard the ship was handled through the democratic process established in the crew's articles. When a crew member violated the ship's rules, his case would be heard by the entire crew, with evidence presented and witnesses called. Punishments were determined by majority vote, and even Roberts himself could be censured if the crew felt he had acted improperly. The ship maintained what amounted to a social welfare system. Crew members who fell ill were guaranteed full shares of any prizes captured during their recovery period. Men who were injured in combat received immediate medical attention and ongoing support from the Common Fund. This safety net created an atmosphere where men could take necessary risks without fearing that injury would mean destitution. Perhaps most remarkably, the Royal Fortune operated according to principles of racial equality that were extraordinary for the 18th century. Roberts's crew included men of African, European, and mixed heritage, all of whom enjoyed the same rights and privileges under the ship's articles. Ability and character mattered more than skin color or national origin. The ship's governance system included regular elections for various positions. The quartermaster, who served as the crew's advocate and managed the distribution of supplies, was elected every 6 months. Gun crews elected their own leaders, and even the ship's cook was chosen by popular vote. This system ensured that leadership positions were filled by men who had the confidence of their peers. Roberts instituted what might be called the world's first maritime grievance procedure. Any crew member who felt he had been treated unfairly could demand a hearing before the entire crew. These proceedings were conducted with scrupulous attention to fairness, with both sides allowed to present evidence and call witnesses. The ship also maintained a system of continuous training and development. Crew members were encouraged to learn new skills, and those who showed aptitude for navigation, gunpowder management, or ship repair were given advanced training. This investment in human development created a crew that was not just loyal, but genuinely skilled in all aspects of seamanship. The true measure of any code of conduct lies not in its written words, but in how it's applied during moments of crisis and decision. Throughout his career, Captain Roberts faced numerous situations that tested his commitment to the democratic principles and humanitarian values his crew had established. These moments revealed the depth of character that made him not just a successful pirate, but a leader who earned genuine respect from friends and enemies alike. One of the most famous examples of Roberts' adherence to his code occurred during an encounter with a Portuguese slave ship off the African coast. When the Royal Fortune intercepted the vessel, Roberts discovered conditions below deck that horrified even his experienced crew. Hundreds of enslaved Africans were chained in spaces so small they could barely sit upright, many suffering from disease and malnutrition. According to the strict letter of pirate law, human cargo was considered valuable prize that should be sold for the crew's profit. However, Roberts called for an immediate crew vote on the matter. Speaking to his assembled men, he argued that their code's principles of human dignity and fair treatment should extend to all people, regardless of their legal status in the eyes of various governments. The crew voted unanimously to free the enslaved Africans, providing them with supplies, medical care, and transportation back to the coast. More remarkably, Roberts offered positions aboard his ship to any of the freed men who wished to join his crew. Several accepted, becoming valued members of the Royal Fortunes Company and participating equally in the democratic governance of the ship. Another test of Roberts's principles came during a confrontation with HMS Swallow, a British naval vessel commanded by Captain Challoner Ogle. When several of Roberts's crew members were captured during a skirmish, the captain faced a choice. He could abandon his men to their fate, or risk the safety of his entire crew in a rescue attempt. Roberts called for a crew meeting to discuss the situation. Some argued that attempting a rescue was too dangerous, and that the captured men knew the risks when they chose the pirate's life. Others insisted that the crew's mutual obligations didn't end when men were taken prisoner. Roberts himself argued that their democratic principles meant nothing if they abandoned crew members in their hour of greatest need. The crew voted to attempt a rescue, and Roberts devised a daring plan to trade captured naval officers for his imprisoned men. The exchange was conducted with military courtesy on both sides, with Roberts and Captain Ogle treating each other as honorable enemies rather than as criminals and lawmen. Though the rescue attempt ultimately failed, the effort itself demonstrated the crew's commitment to their shared values. Roberts's commitment to mercy was tested during an encounter with a merchant captain who had previously mistreated captured pirates. According to several witnesses, this captain had tortured pirates before turning them over to authorities, violating the informal codes of conduct that governed warfare at sea. Roberts's crew demanded brutal revenge, but the captain called for a formal hearing before any action was taken. The proceedings lasted an entire day, with witnesses called from both sides and evidence presented according to the ship's articles. Roberts himself served as judge, ensuring that the merchant captain received a fair hearing despite the serious charges against him. When the evidence clearly supported the accusations, Roberts faced the difficult decision of how to balance justice with mercy. Rather than ordering execution or torture, Roberts chose a punishment that was both meaningful and merciful. The captain was stripped of his command and marooned on a small island with adequate supplies to survive until the next passing ship. His crew was offered the choice of joining Roberts's company or being deposited safely at the nearest port. Most chose to leave, but several, impressed by Roberts's fairness, requested to join his crew. Perhaps the most touching example of Roberts' adherence to his principles occurred when his ship encountered a vessel carrying medical supplies to a Caribbean colony suffering from yellow fever. According to pure pirate logic, medicine was valuable cargo that should be seized and sold. However, Roberts recognized that taking these supplies would condemn innocent people to death. Not only did Roberts allow the medical ship to pass unmolested, but he provided it with an escort to ensure safe passage through waters known to be frequented by less scrupulous pirates. He also contributed supplies from his own stores to help the relief effort. This act of mercy, performed without expectation of reward or recognition, exemplified the humanitarian principles that set Roberts apart from other pirate captains. When crew members questioned the wisdom of giving away valuable supplies, Roberts reminded them of their code's provisions about protecting the innocent and helping those in need. He argued that their success as pirates meant they had a responsibility to use their power wisely and compassionately. These examples weren't isolated incidents, but part of a consistent pattern of behavior that earned Roberts a reputation for fairness throughout the Caribbean and along the African coast. Merchant captains who encountered him often wrote letters praising his courtesy and honor, and several colonial governors acknowledged privately that Roberts was more reliable than many legitimate officials. As Roberts' success grew, so did his fleet. By 1721, he commanded 4 vessels, with a combined crew of over 400 men, a floating nation that operated according to democratic principles while maintaining the efficiency necessary for survival in the dangerous world of maritime piracy. Managing this expanded operation required Roberts to evolve from a ship captain into something resembling a head of state. The challenge of maintaining democratic governance across multiple vessels led Roberts to develop innovative solutions that wouldn't have been out of place in a modern federal system. Each ship in the fleet maintained its own crew articles based on the original Royal Fortune Code, but adapted to the specific needs and personalities of their crews. The captains of subordinate vessels were elected by their own men, but major fleet decisions required approval from representatives of all ships. Roberts instituted what amounted to a pirate congress, where representatives from each vessel would meet aboard the flagship to debate and vote on fleet-wide policies. These gatherings, held whenever the ships were anchored together, became remarkable exercises in participatory democracy. Sailors who had never imagined they could influence major decisions found themselves debating strategy and policy alongside experienced officers. The fleet's medical system became a model of mutual aid that was centuries ahead of its time. Each ship contributed to a common medical fund that ensured any crew member from any vessel could receive treatment regardless of which ship he served on. Roberts also established a system where the fleet surgeons would regularly transfer between vessels to share knowledge and provide specialized care. Communication between ships was maintained through an elaborate system of signals, coded messages, and regular exchanges of personnel. Roberts understood that isolation bred discontent and suspicion, so he encouraged crew members to transfer between vessels, share stories and skills, and maintain friendships across the entire fleet. This policy created bonds that transcended individual ship loyalty and strengthened the entire organization. The fleet's educational system was expanded to include not just basic literacy and navigation, but also what we might now call leadership training. Promising crew members were given opportunities to serve temporary assignments on different vessels, learning various aspects of ship management and democratic governance. Roberts was essentially creating a pipeline of capable leaders who could take command if existing captains were killed or elected out of office. Perhaps most remarkably, Roberts established what amounted to a pirate diplomatic corps. Selected crew members were trained in negotiation, languages, and cultural sensitivity to serve as ambassadors when the fleet needed to interact with colonial governments, native populations, or other pirate organizations. These diplomats carried credentials signed by Roberts and were expected to conduct themselves with the dignity befitting representatives of a sovereign nation. The fleet's justice system evolved into something resembling a federal court structure. Minor disputes were handled at the ship level according to each vessel's articles, but major crimes or disputes between crews from different ships were tried before a panel of judges selected from across the fleet. These proceedings were conducted with elaborate attention to fairness and due process that would have impressed legitimate legal scholars. Roberts also instituted a fleet-wide intelligence network that gathered information about naval patrols, merchant shipping schedules, and political developments throughout the Caribbean and Atlantic. This system relied not just on captured prisoners and port contacts, but on a network of sympathizers in various colonies who provided information in exchange for protection or payment. The economic system that governed the fleet was perhaps its most innovative aspect. Rather than simply dividing spoils among individual crews, Roberts created a fleet-wide treasury that funded common expenses like ship maintenance, medical supplies, and payments to informants. Each ship contributed a percentage of its prizes to the common fund, but decisions about major expenditures were made democratically by the Fleet Congress. Roberts even established what might be called a pirate pension system. Crew members who had served faithfully for several years were guaranteed support in their old age or retirement, funded by the fleet's common treasury. This system wasn't just about caring for aging pirates. It was a recognition that men who had risked their lives for the common cause deserved security and dignity in their later years. The fleet's relationship with various colonial governments was complex and carefully managed. Roberts maintained unofficial diplomatic relationships with several governors who found it convenient to have a reliable pirate leader they could negotiate with rather than dozens of unpredictable individual captains. These relationships were managed through formal protocols that resembled legitimate diplomatic practices. Training and professional development became fleet-wide priorities. Roberts established specialized schools for navigation, gunnery, ship repair, and even business management that crew members could attend during periods when the fleet was anchored in safe harbors. The most promising graduates of these programs often became officers or were selected for special assignments. The fleet also maintained what amounted to a maritime postal system, carrying letters and packages between various Caribbean islands and African ports for residents who had no other reliable means of communication. This service, provided free of charge, helped maintain Roberts's reputation as a leader who served his community rather than simply exploiting it. Perhaps most importantly, Roberts used his expanded fleet to provide protection for smaller, independent pirate crews who agreed to operate according to his code of conduct. This system created a kind of pirate confederation that brought order to waters that had previously been chaotic with competing criminal enterprises. All great stories must eventually reach their conclusion, and Captain Bartholomew Roberts' remarkable career came to an end on a February morning in 1722 off the coast of Cape Lopez in present-day Gabon. The circumstances of his death were as dramatic as his life had been extraordinary, and the manner in which his crew honored his memory revealed the depth of loyalty and affection he had earned through years of fair and democratic leadership. HMS Swallow, under the command of Captain Challoner Ogle, had been hunting Roberts for months. The British Admiralty had finally recognized that traditional naval tactics were insufficient against a pirate leader who operated with the discipline and intelligence of a legitimate military commander. Ogle was given specific orders to capture or kill Roberts at any cost, understanding that his death would likely lead to the collapse of the entire pirate confederation. On the morning of February 10th, 1722, Roberts was aboard his flagship, the Royal Fortune, when the Swallow appeared on the horizon. According to crew members who survived the battle, Roberts received the news of the approaching warship with characteristic calm. He called for an immediate crew meeting to decide whether to fight or flee, maintaining his democratic principles even in the face of mortal danger. The crew voted unanimously to fight. They had served under Roberts for nearly 3 years, and they were not willing to abandon their captain or their principles in the face of superior force. Roberts dressed for battle in his finest clothes, a rich crimson coat, a red feather in his hat, and a diamond cross hanging from a gold chain around his neck. He wanted to meet his fate, looking like the gentleman he had always strived to be. The battle was fierce but brief. Roberts positioned his ship expertly, using his superior seamanship to gain tactical advantage over the larger warship. For a time, it seemed that his democratic crew might prevail through superior coordination and morale. However, a single grape shot from the Swallow's cannon struck Roberts in the throat, killing him instantly. What happened next revealed the extraordinary bond between Roberts and his men. According to the terms of their articles, the crew could have surrendered immediately, expecting quarter from their captors. Instead, they made a collective decision that demonstrated their love and respect for their fallen captain. Roberts had often expressed a wish that he would rather die in battle than face execution by hanging. His crew decided to honor this wish by ensuring that his body would never fall into enemy hands. They quickly weighted his body and committed it to the sea, allowing their captain to rest forever in the ocean he had sailed with such distinction. Only after completing this final act of loyalty did the crew surrender to Captain Ogle. Many of Roberts' men chose death rather than betrayal, and those who were captured spoke of their captain with such respect that even their captors were impressed. Several British officers later wrote that they had never encountered pirates who displayed such discipline and loyalty. The trial of Roberts's crew became a sensation throughout the British Empire. The proceedings revealed details about the democratic organization of the pirate fleet that amazed legal scholars and government officials. Many observers noted that Roberts's articles provided better protection for individual rights than the laws governing most legitimate institutions of the time. Of the crew members who were captured, 52 were executed, but many others received pardons or light sentences, partly because British officials recognized that most had been pressed into service, rather than choosing piracy freely. Several crew members testified about Roberts' character and principles, creating a public record that preserved his reputation for posterity. The death of Bartholomew Roberts marked the effective end of the golden age of piracy. Without his organizing influence and diplomatic skills, the Pirate Confederation quickly collapsed into competing factions that were easily defeated by naval forces. Within 5 years, organized piracy had virtually disappeared from the Caribbean and Atlantic. However, Roberts' legacy extended far beyond his immediate historical period. The democratic principles he established influenced later maritime organizations, and his ideas about social welfare and individual rights were studied by political philosophers and social reformers. Some historians argue that Roberts' articles represented one of the earliest examples of truly democratic governance in the modern world. The stories of Roberts' fairness and honor spread throughout the maritime world, inspiring countless tales and legends. Unlike many pirate captains who were remembered primarily for their cruelty or greed, Roberts became a symbol of the possibility that even in lawless times, principled leadership could create order and justice. Perhaps most remarkably, Roberts achieved something that few leaders in any era have managed. He created an organization that was simultaneously effective and humane, powerful and principled. His democratic pirate fleet proved that authority could be exercised without tyranny, that discipline could coexist with individual freedom, and that even criminal enterprises could be conducted according to moral principles. In the end, Bartholomew Roberts' greatest treasure wasn't gold or silver, but the loyalty and respect he earned from hundreds of men who willingly followed him not out of fear, but out of genuine admiration for his character and principles. As our gentle journey draws to a close, we find ourselves in a curious place at what feels like both an ending and a beginning. Mario's story, like all the best stories, doesn't really end. Instead, It continues to evolve, to surprise, and to find new ways to bring joy to each generation that discovers it. From those humble beginnings as Jumpman in a simple arcade game to his current status as one of the most recognized characters in human culture, Mario's journey reflects something profound about the nature of imagination itself. He began as a collection of carefully arranged pixels, but through the collaborative magic between creators and players, he became something much more: a friend, a hero, and a gateway into worlds of wonder. What makes Mario's story so enduringly magical isn't just the technical innovations or the clever game design, though those elements are certainly important. It's the fact that Mario represents something pure and timeless about play itself. In a world that can often feel complicated and overwhelming, Mario's adventures offer something beautifully simple: the joy of exploration, the satisfaction of overcoming challenges, and the delight of discovering secrets